What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Takeover. Today, we're going to be covering what's going on in Texas. Obviously, if you haven't heard by now, they had a huge winter storm, and they're having rolling blackouts, widespread power outages. People have been without power for days. So we're kind of go through how that came about, kind of some reactions to it, and what can be done in the future to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again. So here we'll start with Texas Standard. The headline was, across Texas, extreme cold brings rolling blackouts, traffic accidents, and business closures. I was seeing that a few days ago. There was some really bad accidents. I don't think they're really used to driving in this type of inclement weather. They also don't really have the infrastructure as far as like snow plows that'll dispense salt and all that type of stuff. So this was causing a lot of kind of havoc in Texas. But over the next, few days, there was a lot more that started to, come to the surface, and that was these rolling blackouts. So we're going to have my man TX Youth on TikTok. I'm sorry, I don't know his name, but I think he did a really good job explaining kind of what's going on in Texas. I think this was posted a few days ago. So we'll listen to him and what he has to say.
Let's talk about what's happening in Texas right now because it is a big issue. As I'm sure most of you know, Texas is experiencing the coldest weather we've had in decades right now. And on top of that, we are experiencing widespread power outages. An estimated 2 million people in Texas right now do not have power and have not had power for hours. Texas's energy capacity in the last 24 hours has dropped 30 gigawatts, and 26 of those gigawatts have been lost from natural gas and other unrenewable resources. On the other hand, sources such as solar and nuclear are producing at full capacity. Texas's inability to diversify our energy portfolio is directly impacting people right now. Our governor has refused to invest in renewable energy, and it is biting us in the butt right now. People are cold, people are at risk because Greg Abbott is in the pocket of big oil.
So that was a really great explanation by him. Most of their loss of power is coming from non-renewable energy sources like natural gas, like coal, and their renewable energy sources are actually running almost at full capacity. I'm not sure about that nuclear claim he made. I think one of the factories might have went down, or the plants might have went down, but for the most part, all the renewable energy sources are actually running well, and there's what is what is keeping the power on for the most part. So Catherine Trawick here on Twitter also confirmed that. She said it's confirmed the blackouts in Texas are primarily because of frozen instruments at gas, coal, and nuclear plants. That's why I'm not sure about the nuclear claim. I think there might have been one nuclear plant that kind of had frozen instruments, so couldn't work, but I think the rest of them were fine. She continues and says, as well, limited supplies of gas, according to ERCOT. Frozen wind turbines were the least significant factor. So why is it important that she puts that in at the end? Well, a lot of the right-wing media, including Fox News and some of the Republican congressmen, even in Texas, were kind of parroting this idea that this is why we shouldn't do the Green New Deal. It's the wind turbines freezing's fault. This is why we need to have natural gas and coal and oil forever and ever and ever. Even though it's obviously contributing to climate change in horrible ways. And it is part of the reason why usually when you get 35, 40 degree weather in Texas in the past, now it's -5, -10, and it's causing, all these factories and plants to shut down. So let's take a listen to what Greg Abbott, who's the governor of Texas, has to say about what's going on in his state right now.
Gas, oil, old-fashioned oil, and coal. I'm not against nuclear energy either. I'm not against wind turbines. But my question is, if you have these rolling blackouts and you got freezing weather, and they're not reliable and it's use it or lose it, what good is it?
Sean, this shows how the Green New Deal would be a deadly deal for the United States of America. Texas is blessed with multiple sources of energy, such as natural gas and oil and nuclear, as well as solar and wind. But you saw from what Trace said, and that is our wind and our solar got shut down, and they were collectively more than 10% of our power grid. And that thrust Texas into a situation where it was lacking power in a statewide basis. That was power that was spread out by that ERCOT organization that you were talking about. As a result, it just shows that fossil fuel is necessary for the state of Texas as well as other states to make sure that we'll be able to heat our homes in the wintertime and cool our homes in the summertime.
Okay, so almost 100% of what he just said is the complete opposite of of reality. Solar, I believe, didn't lose any capacity, and wind, I think, lost half of its capacity. But most of the capacity loss was from these non-renewable energy sources like natural gas, coal, and oil. So he's completely lying about that. He also does mention that solar and wind are only a little bit over 10% of their energy grid capacity. So one, that means you don't have a diversified energy grid, which is a huge problem right now. People are freezing because of them not diversifying their energy grid. See, when you have a position of power like Greg Abbott and you choose to not use it according to what a lot of other states do, which is diversifying their power grid so they don't put all their eggs in one basket, it has consequences. And we're seeing that right now in Texas with a lot of people not having power for days. So he's allowed to just go on Fox News, lie to their viewers, and of course he gets no pushback from Sean Hannity. Why would he? And he completely absolves himself and politicians, Republican politicians like himself in Texas. He completely absolves himself from their responsibility for this crisis. And they are largely responsible for this crisis, and we'll find out why a little bit later on in this video. AJ Plus reported that a mayor in Texas resigned after telling people it was their own fault for not having power during the storm. No one owes you or your family anything. Millions statewide have no power. GOP lawmakers falsely blamed renewables, which we just saw Greg Abbott do in that Hannity interview, despite gas and coal causing 2 times as many blackouts. See, a lot of times when you're a Republican Party, you can just operate based in another reality, and you can go on Fox News, you don't get called out for it. Granted, the Democrats do that a lot on MSNBC and CNN as well. But right now, we're talking about Greg Abbott and Fox News. So he goes on there, he lies about that. Then you have another mayor somewhere else in Texas. He is staying on brand and consistent with messaging with the whole pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It's almost a parody of itself. But no, they pay taxes to the government. So the government actually does owe them power. The government does owe them the resources that they need to survive because they pay taxes to that government. That's what the point of taxes are. See, I think that's kind of been lost somewhere in the American discourse in the past, 30, 40 years. Like if you're paying 30-something, 40-something, sometimes 50% in taxes, you actually are owed a decent standard of living. That's what the social contract is supposed to be. So he had to resign because of this dumb comment. And he should be nowhere near a position of power if this is how he feels about his constituents and other residents of Texas. So now we come to Ted Cruz, who, was famously trolled by Donald Trump, then came around to supporting Donald Trump because he cares more about power and greed than he does about his actual constituents or even his own dignity and pride. He said this was back in August when California was having those wildfires and there was blackouts because of the reduced energy output. He said California is now unable to perform even basic functions of civilization, like having reliable electricity. Well, Ted, don't you think a basic function of civilization, especially in the richest country in the world, is everyone being able to have healthcare no matter how much money they make? See, you're willing to troll California when this happens, but you can't even stick to your own standard, because a basic function of civilization is if I'm hurt or I'm sick and I need help and there's doctors available to help me, but I can't afford it or I can't pay for it, and then I don't get it, that's not being able to perform basic functions of civilization. So before you start tweeting out stuff like this, maybe reflect back on the fact that there's a lot of people in Texas, in your own state, who can't afford healthcare as a basic form and function of civilization, but you don't support any policy that is actually going to get them that healthcare. Figures. He continues saying Biden, Harris, AOC. This whole thing where they're like Biden, Harris, AOC, like they have such different politics. Like, I just love how they always just group them all together. Like, you can't sit there and act like AOC and Joe Biden have the exact same plan on climate, or the exact same plan on healthcare. Now, will I disagree with some of the squad's tactics and strategies to get that policy? Sure, we can have those disagreements. But when they group them all together like this, I hate that because it's so dumb. He says Biden, Harris, AOC want to make California's failed energy policy the standard nationwide. Hope you don't like air conditioning. Then there goes the fear mongering, all the BS the GOP always does. And guys, this is why I don't talk about them that much, because this is like like Ted Cruz is like a parody of not only a person, but also of a politician. Like he doesn't support anything that's actually going to help the residents of his own state. And he got trolled by Donald Trump, dunked on him multiple times, and came around to supporting him. Why? Because he just likes power. People were trolling him for this. You know, now that everything's going on in Texas, they have the same power outages, even worse than California had. And he says, I got no defense. A blizzard strikes Texas and our state shuts down. Not good. Stay safe. Okay, so what are your solutions, Ted? Do you have any solutions to make sure this doesn't happen again? No, of course not. We'll find out why, even if he knew what the solutions were, which I'm sure he does, why he won't support those solutions. We'll find out a little bit later. Brian William Jones on Twitter says, this is a good time to note that the electrical grid in Texas was deregulated, privatized, and removed from interconnected networks to avoid federal regulation and increase profits to a small number of wealthy individuals. So most of the country shares a power grid. I think it's pretty much nationalized other than Texas. There's a western side and an eastern side. So if a particular state needs more power, something happens within their state where their energy output is lower, they can actually borrow energy from another state. So we're actually sharing power with each other. That way we make sure that everyone can have that power that they need to survive in some type of inclement weather or climate disaster like we're seeing here in Texas. But Texas, being Texas and wanting as little regulation as possible, and as much capitalism as possible, they decided they're going to not be a part of that. They're going to have their own electrical grid. They're going to privatize that electrical grid, sell it to the highest bidder, and make sure that because of the oil and gas contributions that come out of Texas to these politicians, they're going to make sure that they don't diversify that electrical grid, which is why you only have a little over 10%, like Greg Abbott said, of solar and wind, when a lot of the other surrounding states actually have diversified their electrical grids and can share that power if need be. You can see it on this map right here that Texas is really the only state that's super heavily affected by this winter storm as far as these power outages go. Even though it hit some of their surrounding states as well, they weren't as negatively affected. One, because of like I said earlier, the diversification of their grid, and because they can share power or receive power from the surrounding states. So now we're going to see why Greg Abbott and Senator Ted Cruz and someone like John Cornyn, who's the other senator for Texas, someone like Dan Crenshaw, why exactly is it that even though all the science and all the data says that they should start using more renewable energies, we're seeing now that they're more reliable, and they're going to start becoming cheaper, not not too long from now. And obviously, it doesn't even matter if they were more expensive. Climate change is real. It's here. We're seeing it. And we need to do something about it right now. We're going to see why, despite all of that, they still want to make sure that Texas is completely reliant on oil and gas. So Gizmodo reports that as the crisis of rolling blackouts in Texas unfolds this week, some of the state's loudest Republican politicians are falsely dragging frozen wind turbines as the cause. But behind every wind energy smear by a Texas politician is a dizzying amount of money contributed by the fossil fuel industry. She continues saying all three, Cruz, Cornyn, and Crenshaw, have continued to scapegoat renewables throughout the week. And looking at their donors, it's no surprise. Multinational names like Exxon and Chevron to local players gave tens of thousands of dollars to Cornyn, Cruz, and Crenshaw over the past year. So they get these donations to make sure that from these oil and gas companies to ensure that they can win their reelection campaign, because most congressional campaigns are won because you have more money. So they go out and get the money from these corporations, these oil and gas executives, and then when it comes time to make legislation or to maybe diversify your energy grid, they're like, nah, we're good. We're going to stay on oil and gas. And then something like this happens where they're grossly underprepared. They don't have any reserves. Their only reliable energy sources are those renewables, which they've invested nothing into. And then who gets hurt? Well, who gets hurt are the Black and brown communities or poor communities who, when they're doing rolling blackouts, seem to never actually get their energy turned back on or their power turned back on. They just sit in the freezing cold for days. That's what the consequence of these policy decisions are. So I saw this tweet from Adilsa Argentine. Sorry if I'm butchering your name. She said, "I'm so mad right now at the cities who are leaving so many people without power. Most of the wealthiest part of the cities are all lit up, especially downtown, while homes are in complete blackout. Check out these photos of Austin and Houston." So you can see in both these photos, the downtown area, ostensibly where a lot of the money is and a lot of the richer, more wealthy people are completely lit. And then all the surrounding areas are completely blacked out. So when you have a rolling blackout, the idea is, right, in some places you have no power, and then but eventually that place will have power, and then another place will be without power, so you can conserve the energy coming from the grid. But in a lot of these situations, the wealthy parts of town stayed lit. It had energy. It was able to not freeze to death. But these obviously poorer, less wealthy communities, I'm sure Black and brown communities, were left without power for days, to the point where some people were freezing to death. And so you see also on Instagram, Young Black Austin said, "A tale of two cities. On the right is downtown Austin. To the left, East Austin. Look who has power." So I think the East Austin is where more the like I said before, more of the minority communities, poor communities live. And then downtown Austin obviously is where a lot of the money is. So you can see, it's just such a stark contrast. You see it right there in a picture. The wealthy people just hoarding all the power, all the heat, everything necessary to survive. And the poorer communities, the Black and brown communities, left to just fend for themselves. This is the type of system that we have in this country. And until we start fighting back against this, when these inclement weather events continue to happen, this will continue to happen, where people who already don't have the money to maybe go and stay in a hotel or go fly somewhere else and leave their home, the people who don't have those means are the ones left without power, are the ones left to fend for themselves. How is that equitable? How is that fair? How is that a just society? It's not. And you say, okay, well, maybe those people can go stay in a hotel, maybe $100 a night. They can move their family in for a few nights. Well, what did the hotel industry start to do? Well, they started to jack up their prices because they knew people were desperate and struggling and would pay pretty much anything to have heat or take a hot shower or just get out of the freezing cold. At this Ramada Inn, they increased their price to $1,500. upper middle class people probably couldn't even afford that. Like that's unbelievable. That's for 2 nights. So they're charging $750 a night. I mean, it's just unbelievable to see what's happening down there in Texas. How you're seeing the stark contrast between the elite and the wealthy and the people who are poor and less fortunate and don't have the means to survive right now. They don't have the means to just go somewhere else. They don't have the means to pay for $400 a night for a hotel when it's normally under $100. They don't have those means, and they're being left out. They're being left behind. So Ted Cruz, are you going to answer for that? Are you going to answer for those people? John Cornyn, Greg Abbott? Are you going to answer for the people who have frozen to death sitting in their cars because you decided to take oil and gas money and not diversify your electrical grid and not share power and be able to receive power from the surrounding states? You have to answer for those deaths. You have the power in your state to do something. So a nice little tweet isn't going to do anything, Ted Cruz. You're a powerful senator. Why don't you do something to help those people? It's really sick. It really is. And I just want to end this by showing y'all this tweet from Fred Harding. Raise your hand if you're in a blue state. It's real cold and your lights and heat are still on. Yo, that's cruel. Like, I truly don't, in this moment of crisis, I don't care who you voted for. If you need help, I'm going to do everything I can to try and help you. If you need help, I'm going to show you some resources to get that help, or I'm going to, try and pressure the politicians there to actually help you. I'm not just going to mock you. And you say, well, they were mocking people in California during the wildfires. Okay, that's wrong too. I mean, isn't that one of the oldest sayings? 2 wrongs don't make a right. So next time California's in a crisis and they mock you just like you're mocking them, now you're going to cry foul and play victim? That's just going to keep going back and forth to the end of time. Or are you going to say, no, let's come together. Let's hold the people in power accountable. Let me see if I can reach out to you. So next time you can pressure, maybe a challenger to Greg Abbott to actually support renewable energies, to actually support things that are going to help poor people, help the downtrodden, help these communities that are completely frozen out right now. Why don't you reach out to them? Because this might be an opportunity in a crisis to actually get them over to your side. But if you're forever going to play the partisan game of mocking each other and mocking other Americans because they've just been duped by a different party, unlike you being duped by the Democratic Party, is that game just going to go on forever? Or are you actually going to step up and say, let me reach out to you. Let me get you to come to my side. Let me reach out to you in a crisis and say, this is why we need renewable energies. This is why we need a Green New Deal. This is why what they're telling you on Fox News is BS. And you're experiencing it right now. Do you actually want to grow the coalition? Or do you want to forever be in this game where the elites watch as you mock the Republicans mock the Democrats, and they just run out the back door with all the money?